make sure to keep those contacts fresh. But I wanted them to know, hey, this was an awesome week. I appreciate you. I love you, because you don't know how those relationships are going to affect your life in the future. I go to these and it blows my mind what the pest control industry has done for people and how it blesses people's lives.
Welcome to the Bug Bucks podcast, a podcast designed to help you become a bug money millionaire. Today's episode is brought to you by Bug Bucks Plus, the #1 course designed to help you start and grow your pest control company. I'm your host, Eric Bassett. I've got Allan back with me, fresh from PestWorld, which we'll dive into here in just a minute. How's it going, Allan?
Going great, brother. Going great.
Awesome. So before we dive into his PestWorld experience, I just want to remind everybody listening, the best way to receive new episodes is by subscribing to our show on your preferred podcast platform like Apple, Google, Audible, or Spotify. If you love the show, please leave us a rating and a review. And one last reminder, if you haven't joined our Facebook group, go to Bug Bucks. That is BUGBUX. We've got over 3,500 other pest control owners in that group waiting to connect with you and share their thoughts. That's also the best way for you to share your feedback on our show and have your questions highlighted and discussed here on the podcast. So make sure you find us on Facebook and join the group. All right. So today we are diving into PestWorld 2023, which was in Honolulu. And I am super jealous that I didn't get a chance to go. But Allan's going to fill us in on all the details, all the nitty gritty, the good, and maybe even the bad. We'll talk about areas of opportunity. We'll see. So Allan, give us the overall vibe. PestWorld 2023, Honolulu. What was it like?
It was different in a lot of ways, as I expected prior to going. Now, keep in mind that while I own a pest control company, I go and I spend a lot of time with the companies that I own. So my perception is going to be different than somebody that registers not as a vendor, but as a participant or attendee or pest control company, because they're going to be more in the general sessions, the breakout, individual classrooms and things like that. Whereas I spend most of my time networking and in the exhibit hall. But it was definitely a more relaxed, no agenda type of PestWorld, where before it felt, it felt like everybody went there with a specific purpose. And I guess that kind of ambiance matches where it was at. So the hotel was the Sheraton Waikiki that MPMA kind of got a special deal with. And that's like beachfront. So like, yeah, I had an amazing room. Like I could see like, the beach, like right out my window. And so it kind of matched that vibe. There were a lot fewer people there. My guess is somewhere around 60-ish%, maybe even less, compared with PestWorld 2022, which was in Boston. There were also fewer vendors. So the exhibit hall, I've never seen it this way. And it was a really big exhibit hall, but there were a lot of like empty booths, and the exhibit hall itself was pushed away from the actual walls. In Vegas, and I don't have the data regarding like square footage and things like that, but in Vegas there were 2 separate exhibit halls. Vegas was really busy too, so it was more relaxed. It felt like less pressure, where you just spent time getting to know people a little better. And there was a lot of golf. There were a lot of events. Lots of luau's and dinner cruises, and the vendors were doing a lot of that stuff, just really treating the pest control companies like really great. So on that side, like Proof is kind of wined and dined by a few of our largest vendors. So we went to a really expensive luau at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, which is like this famous hotel, historic hotel. And, so there were a lot of those events. I think that's where the the real value of PestWorld is now you're going to run into a class, and I've talked about this before. You're going to run into a class or a speaker or a presentation that really resonates with you, gives you some good ideas, maybe some motivation um, to help you with your pest control company. But I think at the end of the day, and these are people would come up to me and that I wasn't familiar with and say something like, "Hey, listen to the podcast, appreciate it. Get some advice about how they should approach PestWorld." And those were kind of my big takeaways. Like, hey, the exhibit hall is great to kind of see where technology is going, see if there's any new products, connect with the vendors that you're already doing business with. I talk a
Mhm.
lot about how that is a two-way street.
Mhm.
So you have to have really good relationships with your vendors, and it's not just take. Um, and so there was this. Um, it just felt, even though, so I had 3 companies with booths, Bug Bucks Plus, Rana, and Lizard Marketing, but it just felt, and I think part of it was because of the fewer attendees. And there was also this, it felt like, the difference between like fall semester and summer semester. If
Yeah,
you've gone to
yeah.
college, it's like, it just feels different. The teachers are more relaxed. There's fewer people around. Like,
Mhm.
it's easier to get good grades, like stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
You have this like more relaxed environment, ambiance. That's what it was. It was awesome, man. I was exhausted when I got home. I spent a lot of time with guys like Kyle Turner, owns a great company in Sacramento. Preston Peterson, spent a long time pressing golf with him a couple of times. Johnny Romney owns Quell Pest Control in Arizona. John Speed owns a great company on the islands. And the list goes on and on. And a lot of time rubbing shoulders with really good vendors. Spent a lot of time with Paul Janamore. Spent a lot of time with nicest representatives, and Syngenta and Viserys and Enview, and it was fantastic. I could kind of go on and on, but that was kind of, this was a great networking PestWorld, one of the best, because most of the time that I spent was networking with people was off of the convention center grounds. Now,
Mm.
the convention center was actually a couple of blocks away from the hotel, which is, it's kind of different. Usually MPMA partners with a hotel that has a convention center, so people go, downstairs
Mm.
from their room into the convention center, whatever. This
Mhm.
one, it was about a half-mile walk or something like that, 3/4 of a mile. I did it once, so it wasn't right next door. So what that did is people didn't hang out there a ton. They would go do stuff. They'd go to the beach, they'd go on a hike, they'd go play golf, they'd go on a dinner cruise, they'd go grab food. And a lot of that was outside of the convention center. So awesome event. A lot of great people. For me personally, it was a chance for me to take relationships that I've known people for a while and really double down on them, just because of the how few people were there.
Mhm.
But it was great, and I'm really looking forward to Denver next year.
Yeah, I think if you were to take a poll, maybe you talked to NPMA and you said, "Hey, the attendance of PestWorld was down, 40% or whatever. How do you
Mm-hmm.
guys feel about that?" I think from a numbers perspective, they'd probably go, shoot, like we want to have attendance be up, and
Yeah.
like that's tough. But from your perspective, from both a vendor and pest control owner perspective, that difference in attendance and the difference in layout, it sounds like it was actually more of a benefit to you and a benefit in the whole networking scheme of things, right? Do you think that there could be, like, are you looking forward to that same kind of dynamic? Because we talked about Denver, right? We talked about the odds
Yeah.
that Denver could very well be one of the largest
Yep.
Pest World
Certainly.
events that's going to happen. So, are you looking forward to Denver being a better attended event, a bigger, better attended event? Or do you think you're going to look back and think, man, I miss the Honolulu days when it was a little bit less intense and we had more time to talk to each other?
I think from both standpoints, that's a really good question. From both standpoints, both the vendor part of Allan and the pest control owner part of Allan, with employees and a team from Proof that went to PestWorld in Honolulu, I'm looking forward to Denver. The way that it makes sense from a PCO's perspective is you go to Honolulu because it's not just further, it's much more expensive. Everything's more expensive. Hotels are more expensive. Flights to get there, any type of entertainment, the food, the islands are expensive. And Denver's not a cheap market. I have a business there. Like, I'm very familiar with it. It's probably one of our kind of middle of the road type branches. We have branches on Long Island, Boston. Those are a little more expensive. So it's not going to be cheap. And it's 2024 is at the Gaylord Hotel, which is right by Denver International Airport, which is out. I think it's on the northeast side of Denver, but it's a hike to the city. So it's going to be a different experience. But kind of going back to what I was saying from the PCO's perspective, because I saw a lot of companies that took their teams out there and fewer people got to go. So the people that were there were owners or high-level managers. You didn't have a lot of the technicians that were in Boston that, would drive from New York, drive from Connecticut, somewhere in Massachusetts, Northeast, or even Baltimore, other parts of the United States. You didn't have that. So I think from the PCO's perspective, and I think this kind of speaks generally about expenses, controlling expenses, and understanding why you're investing in something. You have to look at it as a opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to say thank you to my people. They may or may not get something out of Honolulu. They'll definitely get to meet some really cool people. And I spent a lot of time speaking with employees, a lot. It wasn't just all business owners. And their owners, the owners of those companies where these individuals work, that was kind of their perspective. Hey, these guys have kicked butt. I can't bring the entire team, but I'm going to bring these folks and we're going to have fun. So I would see them go out with their team and they'd go surfing. I think, one of my buddies took his team out and they went ziplining. And so you look at it like, hey, this is still improving our company, but we're getting to know people. We're spreading our brand. We're building our team, our relationships, and so those are more intangibles, which, man, I'm a linear, logical, budget-oriented type of guy. So it took me years to kind of catch up with this concept, but that's where you kind of look at it. Denver, there's going to be more emphasis on, okay, what are the direct benefits? What are the classes? I'm going to look through these classes, my techs or managers or whatever. I want them in these types of classes. This is what I want them to bring back and present to the company. So that's kind of on the PCO side. But I am excited for PestWorld Denver because Honolulu was awesome. I'm looking forward to the crowds. I'm looking forward to, I met some new people, but not as much new people as I normally meet. I'll normally meet, 100 new people during PestWorld. And those numbers were probably in the 20s, 30s, 40s, maybe for Honolulu. But when you go to a PestWorld, you got to reach out. And for the folks that did go, make sure that you're keeping those contacts close. And this is me kind of giving myself a reminder. I met some really good people, and I made it a point of emphasis as I was getting to my flight Friday morning, as PestWorld was wrapping up, and before I took off, of texting. I think I sent a text to 20 or 30 people and just said, hey, thanks. Most of them were people that I already have relationships with, but I wanted them to know, hey, this was an awesome week. I appreciate you. I love you. So with with people that you met, and people that you'd known before. Make sure to keep those contacts fresh. So for the folks that went, make sure that you're texting, emailing, staying in contact with those people that you met, whether they're vendors, whether they were presenters, whether they, another pest control owner that you ran into in an event, whatever, because you don't know how those relationships are going to affect your life in the future. So keep those fresh. Every PestWorld, I take an opportunity to just say thank you. I go to these and it blows my mind what the pest control industry has done for people and how it blesses people's lives. And not a lot of people aspire to be a bug guy. And that's kind of the joke, right? You don't wake up and, end up in the pest control industry on purpose. It's usually by accident, which is true for me also. But we've been blessed with so much. This is such a great industry when times are tough economically, as we're experiencing right now. And, I'm rambling a little bit, but one more thought I wanted to share. This is an exception. And I think I'm going to share this in the Bug Bucks group also. But I came across a vendor, very well known, and the individual in charge of this company, I'm not going to call the company out. The individual in charge of this company does not have the pest controller's best interests at heart. And it became very clear because of some public comments. This individual kept saying things like, we don't care. He didn't say we don't care about. We're not focused on, he would call them fly-by-night companies. And none of us are fly-by-night companies. Now, do some companies start with meager beginnings, low budgets, and not make it? Absolutely. But, sure. But the fact that he was referring to companies, a lot of which are listening to our show right now, that are down in the trenches, a one-man show, maybe they've got a tech, maybe they, a couple of months into the business. Those are the companies I'm rooting for, because that's the company I used to be. And I got really upset at his comments. He's in charge of a very, very large corporation. Yikes. And so my point is this: know who you're doing business with. And this is the exception. And that's why I want to talk about it, is because everybody else is, hey, we're here for you. Like, how do we help? Actually, several of our vendors, I think, several of Pest Proof's vendors and several of the vendors that were there, they talked about how their main focus, and I'm talking about like companies that do hundreds of millions in revenue. They're talking about how they were focused on the smaller organizations. How do we, and the reason why I know that is because I was talking to them regarding Bug Bucks Plus. So I was talking to them about bringing them on board. And for those that don't know, Bug Bucks Plus is our course that helps people grow their companies. But we're also adding vendors that offer special deals to Bug Bucks Plus exclusive members. And so I spent a lot of time talking with those vendors. And by the way, Eric, as a side, I couldn't believe the vendor interest in Bug Bucks Plus. That absolutely blew me away. Was a great surprise at PestWorld. But big time vendors are coming around the corner with Bug Bucks Plus. Are very excited about what we're doing. But kind of back to my point, these vendors were talking to me. Hey, Allan, what are you guys doing to reach the 1, 2, 3, less than 10 technician companies? And we talked about that. But this individual was so hell-bent on talking about how he basically said, if you're not a large corporation, north of 50, 75 technicians, you're not our focus. So what do you do about that? Find out who you're doing business with. Match up with people that create a win-win scenario for you. This is true of your business partners. This is true of your customers. This is absolutely true of vendors. Do business with people that match your core values and match your goals, and be listening out there. Be listening. There was a lot of content that was made at PestWorld And there's going to be a lot of content coming after. There was a lot before, people posting about their Hawaii trip with their teams, all these pictures of cool events. Be listening, keep your ear to the ground, and make sure that this kind of got me fired up, but make sure that your interests are aligned with your vendors.
100%. You know, it's funny. I think an ongoing theme in our podcast has been, you know, trying to develop collaboration versus competition, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a zero sum game. You know, you got to have an abundance type mindset. You know, even from the beginning, I remember when I started becoming more involved in this podcast, you know, you and I spoke about it and just kind of what the vision of the podcast was. And it was always primarily, hey, this is our opportunity to give back to the
Yeah.
industry, right? There might not ever be a monetary option for this, and that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to share what we know because we believe that by giving back, you know, things come back to us tenfold. And since the beginning, that's the way I've experienced it, right? I feel like you're in the same boat. And you really learn the further on you get in your business experience, you learn that that is severely impacted. Your philosophies about how you see the world and how you see business are severely impacted by the people you surround yourself with. And that includes your vendors. And I know that it's really tough to look at a vendor and say, you know what, I'm we just don't align what you believe in and what I believe in, and how we both believe in business and the difference. That's going to make me do something different. And it's hard to do that with a vendor, especially if you need what they have, right? If they have a product, they have a service, they're going to provide something to you that you need in your business. It's going to be hard to look elsewhere and go find a vendor that you do share those philosophies with. That's going to be difficult, but it's going to be infinitely beneficial for you to be able to align yourself with vendors that have the same types of business philosophies, you know? So I
100%.
just, I appreciate where you're coming from with that. It's tough. It's tough to see businesses polarize themselves in situations like that, you know, especially a vendor who all they want to do, you'd imagine that all they want to do is be able to appeal to the mass majority of what of who's there at PestWorld. You know, PCOs from guys who are, you know, $250,000 a year all the way to guys who are 25 million and up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they're going to say something, you know, publicly communicate something that says, "Hey, you know, we do support these kinds of businesses, but like I don't care. We don't support these other types," or you know, it's not something that we share the same philosophy with. If you polarize yourself like that, um, not only do you turn yourself off from those particular companies that you probably don't know a whole lot about, right? But anybody else that are supporting those companies that you have relationships with, oh, now you've kind of put those relationships in jeopardy because they're going to look at you and say, "Dude, really? Like that's the stance you're going to take here?" So,
Mm-hmm.
yikes. Yeah, it's tough to see.
Yeah, I like to see the core values, principles, and interests align.
Yep.
Um, it's different when it's somebody that has operated a pest control company. It's
Mhm.
way different versus somebody that was brought in by potentially a private equity company, never
Sure.
it never done a residential pest control service in their life. Makes a
Yeah.
big difference. Never gone out there in a service vehicle, um, you know, met with a customer. So
Mhm.
now your vendor doesn't have to be that, but it this is a great time of year to be working on those relationships, be reconsidering like, hey, um, is this the best company to be doing business with? And we're an interesting industry because we're blue collar, but our vendors, a lot of them are massive,
Yes.
massive
Yep.
billion-dollar companies, north of 500 million, a lot of them. And they have to be because they're taking years to develop chemicals and
Mhm.
products that are heavily regulated, or they're inventing new equipment or new software, so they have to be, which there's nothing wrong with that, but make sure that you're um, with your individual representative, which there are some fantastic. I spent a lot of time with representatives, and I met a bunch of them from these really large corporations, and they do a good job of adding that human element. Just think of
Mhm.
like your local sales rep for Viserys or Syngenta or Enview or whatever. Those companies, they do a great job of getting the boots on the ground, and so you can have a relationship. I met some of the best people in the pest control industry are on the vendor side.
Yeah.
So anyway, just be aware of those relationships, because when push comes to shove, another COVID happens,
Mhm.
something, remember the vehicle shortages, we couldn't get backpack sprayers, all these things. That dude that I'm referring to is not somebody that I want to be in a relationship during that time, unless I have a company doing $100 million.
Yep.
Then he would care. Otherwise, he wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, and just to touch on something that you mentioned before, the biggest value when it comes to Pest World, especially from an owner perspective, is these relationships you have with vendors. Um, there are few other opportunities where you can really sit down with somebody, rub shoulders with somebody, have conversations, detailed conversations. Pest World is designed for you guys to have that quality time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not only do you get that with vendors, but you also get that with other business owners. It's not every day that you have an opportunity where you meet a business owner who also owns the same company you own, right? Who is likely either has been or is or will be in your same position,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's
Exactly.
financially or size of the company or otherwise. Um, and you get to have that experience over and over and over again with all these different people at PestWorld, right? So, um, for the guys that are listening, if you've been to PestWorld, you've probably experienced this already. For the people who haven't been yet, kind of having that in mind when you invest in something like PestWorld, that could be really beneficial for you, right? You kind of go with that thought in mind. You go ready to network. You go ready to open up and be vulnerable with people, which could be really beneficial. And then if you're investing in this opportunity for your employees, it's a little bit of a different value set for them. One of the things that I think we struggle with in a pest control company and just in our industry in general is my technicians are young. I think every time I look at like the average age of my technicians, it's like 23, 25, which
Mm-hmm.
from an insurance standpoint really hurts. But the idea, kind of the general vibe that they have is, yeah, I'll work here until I find the next thing, right?
Exactly.
And man, I wish there was a way, right, where I could get these technicians on board with the vision and the potential that pest control companies have.
Mm-hmm.
And Pest World is the thing that can open up their eyes, right? They walk into this big convention center, they just see, tons of these different vendors and all these other people, and they see other technicians from other companies with their eyes lit up, and they're like, wow, this industry has potential, right? And they rub shoulders with somebody and they say, oh, what's the size of your company? And they go, oh, 50 million, whatever we did last year. Or they find a technician who's like, oh yeah, I did 6 figures in sales last year just selling on my route. And the guy's mind blown, he's like, there's no way. How's that possible?
Mm-hmm.
Just the ability for them to see the potential of the industry is a huge empowering thing for those technicians. So
It reminds me of the 4 minute mile, right? It's
exactly.
like everybody thought it was impossible until somebody did it, and then a bunch of other people did it, and now it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah, it's like a
not that
standard.
Allan's going to go out there and do it, but
Yeah.
it just takes the ceiling off. So that's a
Yes.
great point.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Well, I know we're short on time,
Yep.
but we've touched on a few awesome things, when it comes to Pest World. I'm sure we're going to have things that just kind of filter into all of our podcast episodes probably for the next, who knows, couple weeks, couple months, little things that we've learned from Pest World and experience from other people. But thanks for letting us pick your brain, Allan. As always, it's
Absolutely.
much appreciated. You get to go out there and experience some of the fun stuff, and then we get to glean all of the pro tips from you. So that's been
Yeah.
great.
No, it was a pleasure, man. Pleasure.
Awesome. Cool. Well, hey, of course, before we let you guys get out of here, just want to remind you one more time, if you haven't had a chance to join our Facebook group, go online, go to BugBucks. That's BUGBUX. And this episode, of course, is brought to you by BugBucks Plus, the #1 course designed to help you grow your pest control company. So if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, go to our Facebook group, make a post, give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you guys. And until next time, keep building those pest control companies.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please show your support by subscribing and leaving us a 5-star rating. Thank you, and we'll catch you on next week's episode.